Good afternoon. I'm welcoming you to Detroit Greek and Latin's beginning kickoff of our spring fundraising, which will be based or feature these one-off presentations of selections from book 21 of Livy. So we're launching here our equivalent of the TBS Pledge Week, but ours is going to go a month as we offer these and hope that people will step up and help us to reach our fundraising goal, which is $5,000. The overall goal of Detroit Greek and Latin, and I'm the founder and director of Detroit Greek and Latin, my name is Walter Melvin Roberts III, is to deliver high quality, in fact, the highest quality Greek and Latin instruction to the masses. I'm lucky enough to hold my PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, Department of Classics. So I am qualified to give that level of instruction. And DGL was founded to actually return Greek and Latin to the Detroit public schools, but we've encountered more resistance than you would expect in doing that. So that's propelled us into this YouTube format, which actually we see will have a wider potential of being able to actually bring Greek and Latin high-level instruction, not only to Detroit kids, but actually to any kid who doesn't go to a school that offers it, or whether he's a tribal kid, a rural kid, or an urban kid, and even for adults who are interested in picking it up. So we're hoping that we can build up these videos over the next few years and keep them on YouTube actually absolutely free. But that's going to depend on the generosity of the general community, because you know, worst case comes, we'll have to charge for them, charge to see them, and it'd be better if we could get the support we need to be able to just put them up free. So that said, today we're going to present Livy's famous description of Hannibal. I'm going to present this. This is going to be very different than what we've been doing with the Tacitus. I'm going to present this in the way I've been presenting it to my Latin 1s and 2s. That is, we're going to first do some vocabulary work to prepare for the passage. And then secondly, we're going to actually look at the passage line by line, much as we do in Tacitus. But we will be doing preliminary vocabulary work to prepare to read the passage, and there will be more attention paid to the exposition of specific points of grammar. I consider this to be an entry level presentation. I believe myself that it's important to introduce students to real Latin and real Greek as soon as possible, because that, I believe, is where the thrill of Latin really is. And if they have the bug, that will perhaps inspire them to put forth the effort that's required to actually master these difficult languages. Okay? So there'll be pedagogical remarks as well, as I put forward my own views about what are best practices if you're doing the grammar translation manner of teaching, which is what I practice because that's how I was taught. Okay, so without any more ado, I'm going to put up our text and begin our lesson. Okay. Okay, so you see the vocabulary list I have for this is not extensive, but it's a good bit of vocabulary that we'll go over to prepare for the passage. It's been said that one needs to have at one's command anywhere from 80 to 90% of the vocabulary of a passage to be able to read it freely, okay, or to begin to read it freely. I like to explain to my students that If you're trying to read real Latin, here the analogy of bandwidth comes into play. If you're trying to battle through a passage of real Latin, you can't have your intellectual bandwidth being taken up with trying to figure out or remember what words mean, or the stop and go of having to look them up as you go along. Nor can you really have your bandwidth, your intellectual bandwidth, taken up with morphological identification. Oh, what tense is this? Oh, what gender is this? Whatever. That has to become second nature when you start reading real authors, or it will be very, very hard to do so. Because once you're facing a real author, you really need all hands on deck. Like I say to my students, it's not a question of what is this, i.e., what tense it is, what case it is, okay? The question becomes, when you're reading real Latin, is what is this doing in the passage to create the meaning that's going on? So the morphological and even lexical, the vocabulary stuff that, is the basic job of the early study of Latin, getting your morphology pretty tight, accumulating a basic vocabulary, so that then you can start actually nailing down and learning the finer grammatical points that are specific to Latin. And these finer grammatical points are things I don't think you're going to pick up in a living Latin context, except one that itself is anchored in literature, simply because English inner or unconscious grammar is not fully commensurate with that of an inflected language like Latin or Greek. But I don't want to raise any controversies, so let's just begin. So with the acquisition of vocabulary, they say that a student has to see a word 10 times before they will get to understand it. And so I recommend, actually, I always encourage my students that when you're faced with a new word, you should make a list, something like the one you see before you on the screen. But more importantly, that you should actually begin absorbing the word by actually the practice of repetition drills. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by repetition drills in a second. But the basic premise is that, and this is where living Latin, of course, is its strong suit. The basic presupposition is that the more senses you involve in the process of learning, the deeper the roots of acquisition will be struck. So you want to involve your mouth in speaking the language. You want to involve your ears in hearing it being spoken. You want to involve your eyes in seeing the word. You want to ultimately involve your motor skills in appropriating the word, as I'm going to show you now through repetition drills. So let me just share with you my sheet so I can show you. The first word we had on our list was the word statim, which means immediately. So what I encourage students to do, and you see that this is a dot camera, I encourage them to write, and hopefully this will be clear, statim. Okay, it is not coming up clearly for some reason. Just see if I can get the focus in here. Okay, so this doesn't look like it's going to work for me. But the idea is that you write the word once in English off to the right or the left of the word, and then you simply write it 3 times in Latin. or 4 times. Statim, statim, statim. Having written immediately once on the side. Okay? And then you proceed with every single word that you want to learn of writing the English once. Okay? So our next word, well, I forget what it is, but ultimately we're going to have the word voltus, which is going to mean face. So you want to write face, and then you want to make a line. Okay. You want to write face. This is the problems of live TV. But you want to write face, and then next to it, or beneath it, you want to write voltus, 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 and say the word. Now, that, I believe, goes a long, long way in jump starting. That will go a long, long way in jump starting your acquisition of vocabulary words. If you say you have 20 words that you're trying to learn, and you do repetition drills with those 20 words, one at a time, and you have them on a sheet of paper or sheets of paper that you keep in a notebook, and then you can go back and page through your, what I call repetition drill bank. Because seeing your own handwriting, having written the word, that itself will be a very strong memory trigger, okay? I mean, we really don't know how memory works very well, but I'm convinced that, when you look at that repetition drill, somehow the memory engages the whole experience of that previous writing. It has those roots that create a stronger active recognition, okay? So I think that repetition drills and keeping a repetition drill bank is a really strong way to jumpstart acquisition of words, okay? So I highly recommend that to any student who's really serious about, putting their shoulder to the wheel. But okay, so let's go back to our list itself and just go through it. Of course, we can't do repetition drills with each, but I'll just go through it for students' sake before we start the passage. So our first word was statim, immediately. Okay, statim, okay. Second, ventus. Ventus, of course, this is the fourth declension word, which is arrival. Okay, you might think of the Catholic liturgical, Orthodox liturgical season of Advent, the run up to Christmas. So ad ventus. And then convertere, to turn towards. Okay, so convertere, to turn towards. And then redo, rediti, reditus, redere, to return. And so we're going to have the expression sibi reditum, return to themselves. And people should recognize, I mean, like I said, I'm trying to put this for even Latin ones could look at this. People may perhaps recognize the reflexive pronoun here in the dative sibi. Return to themselves, reditum, to themselves, okay? Based off, of course, the fourth principal part, which is the passive. And then next, voltus, which is the expression of the face or the features. Oculus, oculi, which is an eye, okay? Habitus, habitus, which is one's deportment or appearance, okay? Os, oris, which is the mouth, but it can also as well be the face, but I think it's the mouth, specifically in this passage. Lineamentum, which is a line or a stroke, but here we're going to have it in the plural. So it's going to outlines. So they're going to be speaking of the outlines, lineamenta oris, of the face, or actually of the mouth, I believe, of Hannibal. Insofar as Hannibal's mouth very much resembles that of his father, I'm supposing. The next vocabulary word is intuere, which is a deponent, and the deponent, a deponent verb is one that takes a passive form, but an active meaning. So I don't know if maybe the early students have learned their passive infantives yet, but instead of RE, you have RI, and I believe that vowel should actually be long. Intuere, to look up on. So even though it takes a passive form, it has an active meaning. And it's a relatively small group of words that behave this way. So they're pretty easy to assimilate and to learn. Okay, and then momentum, which is weight or importance. Momentum, weight or importance. So let's go over that first little set of words, okay? Statim, adventus, convertere, redere, sibi veditum, voltus, oculus, habitus, os oris, lineamentum, intuere, momentum. Okay. So I often with these, the reason why I format my own vocabulary list in this way is because this enables you to fold lengthwise a sheet of paper and cover either one of your two columns, and then review either from the Latin to the English or from the English to the Latin, okay? So for instance, in this context, I guess let's try if this is gonna work. Well, I'm not gonna experiment, but you get the idea. So you just cover the one side of it, and you can go review as you want from one side to the other, okay? So let's look at our next set. And it's very easy just to scan it. You know, the white space allows the eye and the mind to kind of recover between instances of sight. You don't want to cram your vocabulary list in very tight, you know, you don't want it all on a paper like paper was a rare item or something. You want to use white space to make it easier for your mind to survey in one swoop, okay? So then we have favor, favoris, favor, favoris, which is favor, goodwill, approval, praise, or applause. Okay, so favor, favoris. Conciliar, concilio, conciliare, which is to procure or to acquire. And then we're going to have this expression, ad favorem conciliandum, okay? Which the more advanced students will recognize the presence of this nd as being the mark of either a gerund or a gerundive. And the gerund and gerundive are, of course, probably the most characteristically Latin, or the most specific to Latin grammatical formation that there is. So you'll rarely find a piece of real Latin that doesn't have a gerund or gerundive in it. So that's something of a problem if you're like myself and want to show students real Latin as early as possible. If you're using a book like Wheelock, for instance, who reserves the full treatment of the gerund and gerundive all the way to his last chapter, chapter 40, or other books like Ecce Romani that push it way back into the third year. So that means you really can't look at any real Latin because you're going to be stumbling upon this something that it's hard to see and understand. So with my Latin ones, I've actually pushed forward. I mean, they know what the gerund and gerundive is, or at least are aware of it, and are getting used to it. So, and so here we have the accusative with the gerundive, and you see that is just your very recognizable accusative singular ending. And the gerundive is actually an adjective, and you can remember that from gerundive adjective. And it's an adjective, of course, based on a verb, conciliare, to acquire. And the gerundive is passive. So this whole expression means, so ad favorem conciliandum means for the purpose of, praise or goodwill being acquired, okay? Or towards the end of, or towards the result of favor being acquired, okay? So ad favorem conciliandum, okay? As strange as that expression seems to someone who's not used to Latin, by the time you're intermediate and most certainly advanced Latinist, these gerundives and gerunds will come quite naturally to you. But I cannot recommend too strongly that a student, as soon as they are able, get a copy of Gildersleeve's Latin Grammar and read carefully through his section on the gerund and the gerundive, specifically the use of gerunds and gerundives with specific cases. For instance, here I've selected out the relevant section here where it says the accusative of the gerund and gerundive follows the preposition ad, ante, circa, in, inter, ob, and propter. Okay? So ad favorem conciliandum. And so the example from Cicero's Brutus here is nulla res tantum ad dicendum proficit quam scriptio. So no thing so greatly, okay, ad dicendum proficit, is improves, let's just say improves, I could say work towards the improving of speaking than or as much as writing. Okay, so nulla res tantum ad dicendum proficit quantum scriptio. So here you have the same use of ad, which is rather a complex preposition, which is why I inserted the second segment. I mean, generally speaking, Latin prepositions are really quite simple, especially, I guess I should say from the perverse perspective of the Greek preposition, the prepositions in ancient Greek, which are, of course, nothing short of a madhouse, the Latin prepositions are really quite simple. But so we're not going to look at this whole entry, but you have to look. Usually the wonderful thing about these types of entries, as well as your long entries in a big dictionary or lexicon, is that the good stuff always comes at the end. So what we're looking for is actually this thing at the bottom where it says of purpose. So, so if you go through these meanings, you have ad, of motion, whither or to, and this is the one that every Latin 1 student first gets accustomed to, okay? And then respect, and then manner, and then time, but then finally the last one, purpose, okay? So looking back to our thing, ad favorem conciliandum, for the purpose of acquiring goodwill. okay, or literally, for the purpose of goodwill being acquired, okay? So, and look at this last little bit. Also in phrases, post-Ciceronian Latin extended the sphere of odd, and colloquially, it was a substitute for the dative, okay? And you'll see that quite a bit. I don't know if this is the case of it right now, but you will see this quite a bit, you know, because even when we translate it, you know, for favor being acquired, we're using that word that we associate with the dative, you know, for. So ad favorem conciliandum, you know, the ad here is very close to, with the accusative, is very close to what generally is expressed simply by the dative itself. Okay, but to continue, so we have favor, conciliare, and then now parere, which is to obey, imperare, which is to order or command, okay? Habilis, habile, which of course is a third declension adjective of two endings, okay? Which means fit or apt. So habilis, habilis, habile, okay? Haud facile, which translates literally not easily. Haud is a word that gets used by historians like Livy and Tacitus, and it equals, they really like it. It really equals known, okay? It's just really a fancy word for not. So haud facile, not easily, and they use it, Tacitus and Livy, and I'm sure Sallust use it all the time, okay? Okay, so let's go back and review that page. That was a short page because we had all the other stuff. Favor, favor, concilio, conciliare, procure, acquire, parere, to obey, imperare, to order, habilis, habile, fit, apt, haud facile, not easily, haud facile, okay? Okay, our next little bit. Okay, discerno, discrevi, discretus, discernere. Okay, I put a lot of emphasis on my teaching in principal parts of verbs, because if you don't know the principal parts of the verb, you really don't know the verb, okay? And of course, for you students who've yet to learn your subjunctives, the infinitive is so important to know simply because without knowing, because the infinitive is your key, of course, to what conjugation the verb belongs to. And only by virtue of knowing what conjugation a verb belongs to can you sort out the present and form the forms of the present subjunctive. So it's absolutely essential, guys, that you learn your principal parts of verbs. It's onerous and hard work, but it's something that you never stop doing. Every time I read Latin, pretty much, I'll do a little repetition drills with more obscure principal parts that I come across. Okay, so cerno, crevi, cretus, canere, and usually, of course, the order is different. Usually, in most of your elementary books, the infinitive comes second. I'm following here the order of Lewis and Short, who, rightly, as a more advanced text, they kind of assume that you know what the infinitive is, that you know what conjugation of the verb belongs to, and it's really the principal part of the perfect, active and passive, that are going to present your problems. So discerno, discernere, discrevi, discretus, okay? To distinguish or to discern. And then utrum on. And here, utrum on is asking a question. We're going to have, you were not able to discern whether X or Y. So whether X, utrum on, or Y. Okay? Utrum on, whether X or Y. Utrum puer on puella. whether a boy or a girl. Okay, male, of course, is just the irregular infinitive of meaning to prefer from malo, okay? Malo, male, and like wolo, its partners wolo and nolo, it takes the complementary infinitive, to prefer to do X, okay? Agara, very important word, to do, to perform, to carry out, agara, agi, actum, through principal parts. Okay, praeficio, praefeci, praefectus, to place an authority over, to appoint, to command. Okay, praeficio, praefeci. Now, here I've inserted this very important point from Gildersleeve's Latin grammar. I mean, all these little excerpts are from Gildersleeve's. And you will save yourself quite a bit of trouble if you learn the fact that if you become acquainted with this item, okay? Many verbs compounded with the prepositions ad, ante, con, in, inter, ob, post, pri, sub, and super take the dative, especially in moral relations, okay? So praeficere, okay, is very common expression meaning to place an authority or point to command. And so what happens is it's followed by an accusative of the thing, of the person who's put in command, and a dative of the thing over which he's put in command. So this is very common, both in Caesar, Tacitus, Livy. I mean, it's in all of the military writers, because people are always being put in command over other people in these military contexts. So, but like I say, this rule is very important because it will help you to discern why you're looking at some dative that you've probably seen earlier in the sentence. Why, what is, it will help you account for datives, knowing this rule that certain prepositional prefixes actually trigger the dative. Okay, so very important rule, and it will save you a lot of grief if you're aware of it, so that when you come across these verbs that are combined or that have these prepositional prefixes, you are expecting a dative, okay? So periculum, periculi, which is danger, calor, caloris, heat, frigor, frigoris, cold, par, paris, which is an adjective, equal or well matched, okay? Kibus, kibi, food, potio, potionis, drink, desiderium, desire, voluptas, voluptatis, pleasure. Okay, let's go through those. Okay, so discernere, to discern, to distinguish, utrum on, whether X or Y, mala, to prefer, agere, to do or perform, praeficere, to appoint, to command, periculum, danger, caloris, heat, frigor, cold, pars, paris, equal, well matched, kibus, kibi, food, potio, potionis, drink, desiderium, desire, voluptatis, pleasure. Okay. Our final, I think, we might have one more. Discriminare, to separate. Mollus, molle is soft. Stratum, strati is a pillow. Arcesio, arcesere is to seek. Okay, we're going to see it in the Fourth principal part, the passive participle is adjective. Sought, okay, arcesitus, sought, okay. Sagulum, which is a small military cloak, okay. Conspicio, conspexi, conspectus, conspicere is to get sight of. And we're going to see this both in the active and the passive. So I have the passive infinitive here, conspicii, because when conspicio is in the passive, it actually takes on the meaning to be distinguished, to attract attention, or to stand out. So directly related to the English conspicuous, so conspicii, okay? In the passive, conspicio means to be distinguished or to be conspicuous. Okay, vestitus is clothing. Excellens, excellentis is, of course, an adjective, and it means distinguished or superior. Okay, concerto, concertui, concertum, concertere means to entwine, but here we're going to have it in the fourth principal part as an adjective, and concertum proelium will mean hand-to-hand combat. Okay, and students should know by now that proelium means combat or a battle. Okay, so concertum proelium is hand-to-hand combat. Excado, excasi, excasus is to retire or depart. So cado, of course, means to go, and ex means to go out of, so to depart or to retire. Okay, here it's going to have the specific meaning of to retreat, kind of like from a battle. Aiquare, okay, aiquare, to equalize or to balance out, and we'll see the how that works. Perfidia, perfidiae, faithlessness. And then we have, well, let's go back and read the whole page because that's a full page. Discriminare, mollis, mole, stratum, strati, arcesio, arcesivi, arcesitus, arcesere, arcesitus, arcesitus, sagulum, sagulum, conspicio, conspexi, conspectus, conspectere, conspicii, okay, to be conspicuous, vestitus, excellens, excellentis, concerto, concertere, concertum proelium, excado, okay, aiquare, perfidia, okay? And then our last little set of words. First, we have this abbreviated form of the genitive plural of deus, which is deum, okay, of the gods, deum, so we're going to see that. Then we have jus iurandum, which is actually, I think, means an oath, but here you will see that means actually loyalty to an oath. And mereo, merui, meritus, merere. I actually thought it's very interesting. You learn something every day. If you'd asked me before I looked up this vocabulary, I would have thought that mereo was a second conjugation verb, but actually it's third. And then praeter mittere, which means to neglect. And of course, by now, you should be familiar with the principal parts of mittere. Mittere, misi, misum, misera. Okay, so that's our vocabulary for the passage, which I'm going to just take the moment to go through one more time. And if you're an advanced student, and most of this vocabulary is, if you know all this vocabulary, don't sweat it. You can just, I'll have on the comments where you can just forward ahead past the vocabulary lesson and actually begin the thing. So I'm going to read the Latin, and then you can yourself read the English, and So the Latin will be more dominant because that's what you're hearing. Okay, so statim, aventus, aventus, convertere, redo, redidi, reditus, redere, sibi reditum, voltus, voltus, oculus, oculi, habitus, habitus, oris, os, oris, lineamentum, lineamenti, intueri, intueri, momentum, momentum, favor, favoris, concilio, conciliare, parere, imperare, habilis, habile, haud facile, discerno, discernere, discrevi, discretus, utrum an, male, agere, praeficio, praefeci, praefectus, praeficere, periculum, periculi, calor, caloris, frigor, frigoris, par, paris, cibus, cibi, potio, potionis, desiderium, voluptatis, voluptas, discriminare, mollis, mole, stratum, strati, arcesio, arcesivi, arcesitus, arcesere, arcesitus, arcesitus, sagulum, sagulum, conspicio, conspicio, conspexi, conspectus, conspicere, conspicii, to be conspicuous, vestitus, vestitus, excellens, excellentus, concerto, conserui, concertum, conservere, concertere, concedo, concessi, concessus, concedere, aequare, perfidia, deum, usurandum, mereo, praeter, mittere. Okay? So, are you ready to begin? That's our vocabulary, guys. Let's just look it over visually one more time. I won't say anything. Let's just look it over visually one more time. Okay, and if anyone would like me to send them this document so they can have it themselves, feel free to email me, or drop me a note in the comment box, and I will get it to you. Okay, okay, so here we go. I found from our Tacitus presentations that it really works very, very well if we just break up the limbs. I like to call them the limbs of the text. For early students, when you start reading real Latin, I used to call it, and I still call it that, but it's nice having worked hard at Latin for 20 years that Latin no longer feels like this for me. But we all know that feeling. Well, maybe the living Latin people escape it, but the feeling of the elaborate crossword puzzle, okay? The elaborate crossword puzzle. And the reason why it's an elaborate crossword puzzle is because our minds in receiving communication expect, through our habituation as English speakers, to receive that information in the way that English is prone to deliver it, which, of course, Latin and Greek, as fully declined languages, have no need to be bothered with at all. So on first affront, and it feels like an affront, reading Greek and Latin in the original is very, very disquieting experience. I was lucky enough to start with Greek rather than Latin. And I remember when I first read Herodotus, which was the first author I read, I remember telling my fellow undergraduates that reading ancient Greek, the word order was as if they put the words in a jar, put the words in a jar, closed the lid, shook them up, and then spilled them out on the page. Okay? I mean, that was my experience, and that's the experience that most people have reading real Latin texts or Greek texts. However, that is actually, that, like I said, that's only a function of our English patterns of thinking, because ultimately, once you start to actually think like a Roman, according to the literary syntax of the classical era, you see that Roman word order makes perfect sense as it is, or Greek word order are the same. There's nothing odd about it whatsoever, that the clues that are given in the terminations are fully enough to make it completely sensible, and it's only, I should say, the countercurrent of our unconscious English linguistic expectations that hinders or that makes it seem like an elaborate crossword or puzzle, makes it seem like words spelled out on the page at random. Okay, but when you break up the limbs, it kind of helps to straighten things out. Now, I'm assuming here that everyone is familiar with the Latin construction of the ablative absolute. And perhaps I should have given a presentation on that for beginning students. But if you are a beginning student and you don't know what an ablative absolute is, then just pause the presentation here and go to your grammar, go to your online and look up what an ablative absolute is and get used to it. Because I'm just going to assume that the student that's viewing this can handle and understands what an ablative absolute is. Okay, so let's begin. So misas Hannibal in Hispaniam, primo statim aventu, omnem exercitum in se convertit. Hamicarem juvenem reditum sibi, veteres milites credere, eundem vigorem in vulto, vemque in oculis, habitum oris lineamenta que intuere. Dane brevi effecit, ut pater in se minimum momentum ad favorem conciliandum esset, numquam ingenium idem ad res diversissimas parendum atque imparandum habilius fuit, ita quod facile desgeneres, utrem imperatori an exercitui carior esset, neque Hasdrubal alium quemquam praeficere male, ubi quid fortiter ac strenue agendum esset. Neque milites alio duce plus confidere aut audere, plurimum audaciae ad pericula capescenda, plurimum concilii inter ipsa pericula erat, nullo labore aut corpus fatigare aut animus vinci poterat, calores frigoris patientia par, cibi potionisque desiderio naturali non voluptate modus venitus, vigilarum somnique, nec dei, nec nocte, discriminata tempora, id quod gerendis rebus super esset quieti datum, ea neque moli strato, neque silento arcesita. Multi saepe militaris aguto, opertum humi jacentem, inter custodia stationes quae militum conspexerunt, vestitus nihil inter quales excellens, armat qui conspiciebantur, equitum peditumque idem longe primus erat, princeps in prolium ibat, ultimus concerto prolio excedebat. Has tantas viri virtutes, ingentia vitiae quabat, inhumana crudelitas, perfidia plusquam punica, nihil veri, nihil sancti, nullus deum metus, nullum jus jurandum, nulla religio. Hanc cum hoc indole virtutem atque vitiorum, trienio sub habdubal imperatore meruit, nulla re quae agenda videndaque magno futuro duci esset praetemissa. Okay, so I read through the whole passage, and you know, when you attack a Latin passage, like I say, I highly recommend, like we've done today, that you first do some work with the vocabulary, so you at least have a fighting chance, you know, so you're not coming to a complete halt. Because in order to be able to read a passage, you really do have to have 80 or 90% of vocabulary at your command, okay? And I generally myself will read any passage that I'm gonna try to read, you know, a paragraph at a time. I'll just read it straight through out loud to myself 2, if not 3 times before I even begin to try to translate it, okay? And, or should I say, before I begin to try to figure out how the syntax is actually working, you know, what everything is doing, now, as opposed to what it is, what everything is doing to complete the units of meaning. So, you know, and there will always be these little rough spots that are unclear, but over the process of reading it 2 times to yourself or 3 times, you know, part of it, it's almost like something emerging out of the fog. You know, slowly it will start to emerge out of the fog, you know, what's going on, okay? And, you know, that's going to be your experience for a good little while until you've acquired enough vocabulary and sense of an author to actually start reading with some type of spontaneity, you know. I mean, that's the beauty of the Living Latin programs, is that they get people up to being able to read Julius Caesar with comfort much quicker than was normal under previous methods. A little more difficult when we come to more complex authors, but nevertheless, the possibility is still there. So, but I myself very much believe in letting your unconscious mind work on the passage, letting the fog clear just by making yourself read it out loud a couple of times. And then, and only then, you know, go back and review your vocabulary, and then you actually start. Okay, so you'll see that we don't have every word. I didn't put every word in the vocabulary. That would have been an insult to some students who are going to want to watch this. But I cannot impress strongly enough upon people that to do the work to just acquire a basic vocabulary. And there are items out there that I'll mention later that can help you do this. But let's just proceed with this. Now, let me give a little bit of background. Hannibal, of course, is the famous Carthaginian general, famous, of course, for attempting to bring his elephants over the Alps when he attacked Rome. And even though I don't know that he start with 40 elephants, we do know that he only got across, only one of them got across. And that image of an African general bringing elephants over the Alps to attack the Romans, that I think more than anything else has enshrined Hannibal in the popular imagination as someone who's known. So when Hannibal first joins the army in Spain, he joins the army that has as its commander the person who'd taken up command of the forces when Hannibal's father died. And I believe Hannibal himself was maybe 9 or 14, but much too young to succeed to his father at that point. I think 9 years old or so. This man, Hamilcar. So you see Hamilcar here, and Hamilcarim, of course, will be the accusative. But so Hamilcar is the commander when Hannibal arrives on the scene in Spain. And he was sent by the Carthaginian Senate to join the troops in Spain. And this is really the opening of the main action of book 21 of Livy. So we'll go through the passage and bit by bit, and then I'll leave my more literary analysis to the end once we've just dealt with the construed the grammar. I mean, people can go on all highfalutin with literary concepts and analyses until the sun doesn't shine. But in my book, the most important and first thing is that you construe the Greek or the Latin that you're looking at. And there will always be mistakes made. There will always be errors. I myself make a point of, when I'm reading or trying to translate a passage, of actually only resorting to an English translation to elucidate meaning as an absolute last resort. Okay? I will, generally speaking, look at anything up to 6 times, reading the Latin up to 6 times out loud before I will give up trying to figure out what it means, assuming, of course, that I've identified each item, case, mood, case, number, gender, and then for verbs, tense and all that stuff. But you squeeze your knowledge as far as you can to try to put together how the syntax is working before you turn to a translation to solve your solution. That's the best practice. Ultimately, when I got to PhD school and you're reading under pressure and you have to read quite a bit, I had I adopted the 3 strikes policy. Read something 3 times. If it doesn't come out, if you can't figure out what it means, then just let it go. It was Peter Pouncey, the ex-president of Amherst College, who I met as an undergraduate at Columbia and was lucky enough to read my first little bit of Herodotus with him, or actually my second little spell of Herodotus with Peter Pouncey. He wrote a book on Thucydides that was very well received. Well, he's the one who told me, and I'm so glad that he did tell me this. He said, you know, if you can't figure something out, read it out loud to yourself. Read it out loud to yourself. Because oftentimes you'll be struggling with something just in a silent way, but then when you read it out loud to yourself, presto changeo, boom, you'll just see that the Latin just makes sense. The Latin makes sense. And so I'm not talking about substituting English terms for the Latin. I'm talking about the Latin makes sense, okay? So the last thing you ever want to do is write English words in between the lines of your text, or have a translation at your side and be looking at it and, you know, letting your lazy self convince you that you understand the Latin because you just looked at a translation and sort of have a sense of what's going on. No, learning to read Latin with comfort requires quite a bit more than that. And it requires a commitment to the Latin and a dogged persistence that the Latin will make sense to you. I mean, you know, I generally, at this point, I won't look up something until literally I've memorized it. I mean, I can read, if there's a phrase that boggles my mind, I will have it memorized and be able to recite it before I will look it up and try to figure out what it means. Okay. Because you don't want to be one of these people who, you know, actually really thinks they read Latin, but actually just, you know, really just compares Latin to English with their nice little low classical library or whatever, or interlinear text. You don't want to be one of those people. Well, maybe you do if you've got better things to do. I myself decided a long time ago that I didn't have anything better to do than learn to read Greek and Latin very well. So, you know, I can do this luxurious thing. So here we go. Enough of all that. Misas Hannibal in Hispaniam, primo statum aventu, omnem exercitum in se convertet. Okay. So here we have, of course, the reflexive pronoun, which means that this pronoun is referring to the subject of the sentence. Okay. The subject of the sentence, of course, is Hannibal. Okay. So when you attack a Latin sentence, I mean, if you're attacking a Latin sentence, what I like to say is find the main frame of the sentence, okay? Find the main frame of the sentence. And again, this is going back to the elaborate crossword puzzle, but this is where most of us have to begin at one point, okay? Find the main frame of the sentence, which consists of the subject of the sentence, if it's expressed, because oftentimes the subject will just be contained in the ending of the verb, okay? Then you find the accusative object, if it has one, okay? And then you find the main verb, okay? And so, and this gives you, you know, subject, object, verb gives you what I call the main frame of the sentence, okay? So in the sentence we're looking at, and we're not gonna go over all these at this rate because that would take forever, but I just wanna explain this for students who are beginning to translate, okay? So Hannibal is our subject. Our accusative object is exercitum, and then our object is converted. So Hannibal, the army, turned. Hannibal, the army, turned. Okay? And once you have that main frame, okay? Hannibal, exercitum, converted. Okay? That is basically like the frame of the house on which all the other elements are one way or another going to be modifying them. Okay? So let's just take this apart and I won't apologize. I mean, I'm going to assume here that I have some Latin ones who've never really even looked at real Latin before, and who, jumping from their Cambridge or Ecce Romani or whatever they're studying with, Minimus or whatever, have never actually seen real Latin before, and the complexity of real Latin. So I'm not going to apologize. I'm just going to go through this exposition so you'll understand how to attack something and take it apart word by word, if you are still at that early painful stage of the elaborate crossword puzzle. Okay? So what you're going to be then left with is things that are modifying one of these three things. Okay? They're going to be either modifications of the subject, modifications of the object, or modifications of the verb. Okay? So a verb, as we know, is modified by adverbial ideas. So our first adverb in the sentence is statim, and we know that statim means immediately. So we know that something happened immediately. Okay? Now, this unit here is actually quite fun because it's an example of what I call, and what Latin loves to do, and it's what I call a sandwich. Okay? And because English word order would have required this. Okay? Primo aventu. Upon his first arrival, when first arriving, having first arrived. Okay? Now, primo aventu, it's questionable how you want to take that. I myself have developed the concept, which I find very useful. You know, I mean, you could call it an ablative absolute, but I've developed the concept of just simply ablative expressions of circumstance. Okay, and I take this to be parallel to ablatives of time. Okay, but so, and especially when you read, you know, if you just well, ablative expressions of circumstance, I find it very useful concept. Okay, so in the circumstance of his first arrival, immediately, primo statum, primo aventu statum. Okay, but, and then this whole thing, primo aventu statum, is going to be adverbial, modifying the verb convertit. It's saying when this action of the verb occurred. But the reason why I call it a sandwich is because Latin loves to throw these little things. So you have the buns on, you know, primo and aventu are the buns, whereas statum is the meat in the middle of it. Okay? And in your simplest and most happy circumstances, you only have, you know, kind of a poor man's sandwich of, you know, 2 pieces of white bread and a bologna in the middle. But unfortunately, when you get to someone like Virgil, he'll have, like, you know, not in the middle, he'll not only have a piece of meat, but he'll have some tomato, he'll have some lettuce, you know, and you might have 3 or 4 elements separating 2 things that have to agree with one another, or whose endings, you know, because, you know, we know that primo and aventu are ablatives. And so your knowledge of the endings allows you to see that these 2 things go together, even though they've been interrupted by this intruder of statum. Okay? But for a Roman mind that wants to think in these larger units that I call limbs, it isn't an interruption at all. It isn't a violation at all to go primo statum aventu. That is just a very easy unified concept that works very, very well. Okay? So mesus, of course, is the 4th principal part of mitera. So it's passive, having been sent, and here is nominative, so it's modifying Hannibal, okay? So Hannibal, having been sent, and then here we have in Hispaniam, where was he sent? He was sent into Spain. So this is a preposition working adverbially to modify Mises. Where was he sent? Mises in Hispaniam. Mises Hannibal in Hispaniam. Primo statum aventu, omnem exercitum in se convertit. Okay? He converted the whole army, the entire army, to himself. Okay? Which is, I guess, the way of saying he won over the whole army, But actually, I don't want to go that far, because what I want to make the point here is that this is, like I say, originally I was going to separate my literary analysis from the pure grammatical exposition. But the only reason why I don't want to do that is because that's going to just be a little artificial. Because I want to show you. I mean, this is a classic descriptive passage, and if you analyze it carefully, it breaks down at least into three or four, four, even five different segments or parts of it. Okay, so here we just have the setup. Okay, Mises Hannibal in Hispaniam, primo statum aventu, omnex executum in se convertit. Because actually, with that bit of information, we still have an element of suspense. Why did he turn the whole army to himself? Because he was some arrogant guy who thought that just because his father had been general, he could go around and was superior to everyone? Okay, did he direct their attention to him in a bad way? Was he just this useless guy who was always in the way? Did he omnem exercitum in se convertit in that way? Now, of course, convertit in se could itself, eliminate those possibilities. But my point is that there's a element of uncertainty, that this is kind of like a holder or stand, like a tee on which Livy sets his ball, and now he's going to swing and begin his description, okay, by answering the question with what respect or why, because of what did Hannibal convertit in se on just babbling to yourself in Latin using these vocabulary words. I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to do that, because like I say, that's not how I was trained. But I'm sure if one of my living Latin colleagues had been nice enough to join me in this presentation, he could make hay with this set of words and have a really good time. So I think there's a lot of good ways in which detailed grammatical analysis, which is kind of boring for people who don't love it, who don't have that gene, nevertheless can be quite exciting. But I think that what's truly and most exciting about learning and studying Latin is to actually encounter actual literary texts and to get that thrill. And I think that it's well worth all this labor we have to do to access it to a Latin 1 student. I find that in my Latin 1, there are no more exciting moments than when I actually take the trouble to introduce them to an actual piece of Latin, because even though they're just getting an inkling of it, they still do understand that they're looking at something really quite fantastic. Okay, so that said, we can proceed at a better clip now that I've introduced you to this idea of subject SOV as the mainframe, and to the idea of, like I said, sandwiches, because sandwiches are very, very important. Very important concept to get. Okay. Okay. So so now Hamocarum juvenum reditum sibi, veteres milites credere. Okay. Now, it's interesting that the last sentence ended with a had this reflexive in it. But in this following sentence, it's immediately followed by a lim with a reflexive. But this reflexive, of course, is referring to the subject here, veteres milites. Okay, so milites, the soldiers, okay, they believed, okay, credere, and this is for students who are like using Ecce Romani or something. This is the alternative ending of the perfect that Ecce doesn't really emphasize at all, of the third person plural of the active of the perfect indicative. This era ending, which allows, you see it in poets and stuff. It allows a different, it allows your last syllable to be long, short, as opposed to long, long. But so veteres milites credere, and what did they believe? They believed that a young Hannibal had been returned to themselves. Hamocarum juvenum reditum sibi, veteres milites credere. Okay? And why did they believe that? Eundem vigorem in vultu, vemque in oculis, habitum oris lineamentaque intuera. Okay? Now, this is very interesting, okay? This is very interesting because we have here this intuera, which is interesting for two reasons. First of all, it's a deponent verb. It's a passive form with active meaning. But second of all, and as a matter of fact, I mean, based on morphology alone, credere could be an infinitive itself. I'm taking it as a perfect. But he switches here into what's called the historical infinitive. And for people who are not familiar with that, and you wouldn't be if you haven't read much real Latin, I'll just read from Gildersleeve here. He says, the infinitive of the present is sometimes used by historians to give a rapid sequence of events with the subject and the nominative. Generally, you see several infinitives of this type in succession, okay? So historians will bust out of the indicative into the historical infinitive when they want to report boom, 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 boom. Okay? That we won't see a series of them here, but I'm pretty sure that that's what's going on here. It's just it has to be a historical infinitive. Okay. Okay. So and students may or not be familiar with eundem at this point, which is from Isaiah Ed. Forms of the personal pronoun of the third person plus m, where it equals the same. Okay, so they saw in him, and so at undem, what's happened is the has become in under the phonetic influence of the d. So, and you'll see if you study this, the declension of edom, eadem, idem, that you have this transformation of things that end in m to n. But so, what did they see? Intuera, eundem, vigorum, in vultu. Okay. Now, Livy doesn't actually repeat an eondem with whim, so I'm going to eliminate that, but you have to supply it mentally. Eundem vigorum in vultu, vimque in oculis. They saw the same vigor in vultu, in his face, the same power, force, the same force in his eyes. So he had blazing, probably very intense eyes. Okay? And habitum oris lineamentaque intuere. Okay, so I could put the intuere actually here just to show us a little more clearly what's going on. Because this is a good example here of a sandwich. Because here the oris is actually genitive, and it's describing, what did we say? Habitum was the appearance, and lineamentum in the singular is a line, so lineamenta can mean outlines. So the same, and this que is working to unite these two words. So, to an English mind, we could have had this. Habitum lineamentaque oris. Okay, the same, and I guess we could do this. Eundem habitum lineamentaque oris. But again, like I say, he doesn't need to repeat the eundem or forms of, because that's already up in the air, and it's part of the economy of Latin, not to have to do that. Okay, so eundem vigorum in vultu, vimque in oculis, habitum lineamentaque oris. Okay, actually, excuse me. Like I say, it's a sandwich, so it's going to take this element that should be on the edge and inject it into the middle. Habitum oris lineamentaque intuere. Okay, so hamicarum juvenem reditum sibi, veteres milites credere, eundem vigorum in vultu, vimque in oculis, habitum oris lineamentaque intuere. Okay. Now, so I put these little lines here to show the various breaks, that I think can be seen in the way Livy presents this description. And oftentimes students are asked to write a descriptive essay, and we'll see that this essay as a whole employs the strategy that actually begins with Homer, which is called circular structure, where it ends the way it began in a certain way, and we'll see that when we get to the end. So it circles, the whole thing circles back on itself like a snake eating its own tail. So that was the beginning, and now the second little bit. Speaking from the point of view, the fancy literary term, narratology. Okay, which asks the question, how is the author telling the story? Okay, if any of you are writers out there, creative writers, okay. So here we have a question of point of view. Livy chooses to give us our first real glimpse of Hannibal from the point of view of the soldiers. Okay. Later, you'll see, immediately now, he slowly backs away from that point of view by including the commander, and then ultimately he'll just be speaking of Hannibal by himself. But it's a very good thing for him to, this just gives variety to his description. And for any creative writer, shifts of point of view can be very strong elements of the telling of any tale. Okay? So, hamicarum juvenem reditum sibi, veteres milites credere, eundem vigorum in vultu, vimque in oculis, habitum oris lineamentaque intuere. Okay? See, now I'm really fascinated by this idea that this one could be a historical infinitive as well. I'm really fascinated by that. Well, figure it out. The mysteries of Latin. Okay. But so Dane, and Dane is a connective. It means, but soon thereafter, soon thereafter, soon thereafter, brevi tempora, or it just advances. Brevi tempora, but Livy doesn't give you tempora, and students should know, ablative of time when. Okay, so in a short while, then in a short while, okay, but Livy does not give you tempora. He just gives you Dane brevi a fecit, okay, and he doesn't repeat the subject. It's Hannibal. No, we're talking about Hannibal, so there's no reason to repeat the subject. Dane brevi a fecit. He affected. He made it the case. Hannibal made it the case. And like I say, guys, we have to get used to the fact that more often than not in Latin, the subject will not be explicit. The subject will be expressed, will be suppressed, and you will have to just depend on the ending of the verb, the termination of the verb, to inform you that this is the he talking. Okay? So he brought it about in a short while, then, Dane brevi affecit, then shortly he brought it about, and ut. Okay? This is ut, and then here with the subjunctive tense, you'll see in the passage I've marked all the subjunctives in this strange kind of blue, because I know many early students, most elementary books these days delay the subjunctive into the second or even the third year of instruction. And so I've isolated these subjunctives, and you can easily enough review the forms of subjunctive, because they're really not that hard. It's just the uses that are difficult and that scare teachers. So this is what's called an object clause. I'm sorry. He brought about that. What did he bring about? He brought it back. The result clause or object clause. These terms get all mushed in your mind. Object clause. He brought about that. Okay. Dane brevi affecit, ut pater in se, minimum momentum ad favorem conciliandum esset. Okay. Then he brought it about that the Father in himself, okay, was esset, minimum momentum, of very small importance, okay, ad favorem conciliandum, for winning the soldier's fortune. So it's kind of cool how Livy so clearly articulates these two stages. First, they loved him just because he looked like his father, and they saw in his eyes the flash and the vigor. But then very soon, Dane brevi affecit, ut pater in se minimum momentum ad favorem conciliandum esset. And notice how, again, each of, and this is the power of this narrative, each of the little bits both gives information, but also leaves questions that have to be answered. So, starting back at the top, like I said, he won the attention, turned the army to himself, but we have to actually ask how or why. And then now he explains that, okay, answers that question, then proceeds to this next stage. Dane brevi affecit ut pater in se minimum momentum ad favorem conciliandum esset. And we again ask, well, why? How was this the case that the Father in him now became minimal? It wasn't important, okay? And that forms, as it were, a transition to now where he breaks into this more straightforward, focused on Hannibal, pulls away from the point of view of the soldiers, slowly, not immediately and abruptly, but slowly, and pulls back to the point of view of the narrator, and ultimately you'll see even to the reader. Okay, very, very interesting, the narratological shifts that occur in this passage. Okay, okay. Nunquam ingenium idem ad res diversissimus. Okay, so I didn't have ingenium in our vocabulary, but ingenium is like genius or talent. So never, and a common thing you have to get used to is that Latin writers love to just elide, to not express the forms of the verb to be. Okay, so nunquam erat ingenium idem ad res diversissimas. Okay, so never did the same talent, okay, toward res diversissimas. So diversus, this is of course the superlative form, you know, such differing things, such very differing things. Never was there the same talent towards those things, okay? And then we have this parendum atque imperandum. I don't know where to get this thing from. Parendum atque imperandum, okay? And this whole phrase is what's called, is in apposition to this earlier Latin, where by apposition, once it's in this place, our examples are Cicero, orator, and Renus Flumen. Okay, so Cicero, orator, Renus Flumen. So for the River Rhine, Cicero the orator. And here we have accusatives of the gerundives, of the gerunds, I'm sorry. Okay, accusatives of the gerunds. And look at this little number 234. Apposition to a sentence. Sometimes an accusative stands in apposition to a whole preceding sentence, either explaining the contents of the sentence or giving the end or the aim of the action involved in the sentence. So here we simply have a matter of it explaining the contents of the sentence. So what words were these res diversissimas that were so important, or that Hannibal faced with, the same ingenium? And these accusatives of the gerunds in apposition define that as parendum atque imperandum. Okay? And pareo is to obey, imperare is to give orders. So he could both take and give orders, both in taking orders and in giving orders. Okay? Nunquam ingenium idem ad res diversissimas, parendum atque imperandum. Okay? Habilius fuit. So he does actually give you your verb of to be at the very end. Okay? So never was the same person. Okay, almost the same, you can almost say this, the same person ingenium, okay? More suited or better suited, okay? Fuit habilius, and habilius is of course the comparative of habilis, habile. Some of the Latin ones might not have studied the comparative yet, but Numquam ingenium idem ad res dissimilas, parendum ad quem imperandum habilis fuit. Okay? And here, like I say, he switches again his perspective or point of view by inviting and invoking that of the reader himself with this next little bit. Itaque haud facile discaneres utrum imperatori an exercitui carior esset. Okay? Here we have two very important grammatical concepts. And I'm actually, going to actually end this presentation, or I guess I'll call it part one of this presentation, in about 10 or 15 minutes, just because it's taken longer than I expected. I don't mind going into such detail for this first of these presentations, because just get stuff out the way, and then in subsequent ones we can go a little faster. And so we'll do the remainder of this in part two. But itaque haud facile discaneres utrum imperatori an exercitui carior esset. Okay. Now this is one of these complex sentences that would just kind of throw an elementary student for a lot of different reasons. Okay, because there's really is a construction inside of a construction here. Okay, and because if we remember what discanere means, discanere means, it means to discern, and this is an imperfect subjunctive, and it's this use. Okay, and itaque is our connective here, and so how, or as a result, haud facile discaneres. So look what it says here. What Gildersleeve tells us about the imperfect subjunctive. Okay, the potential of the past is the imperfect subjunctive. Okay, so the imperfect subjunctive expresses the potential of the past, chiefly in the ideal second person, the imaginary you. So this is why I say that Livy here has switched point of view, and now having begun with the point of view of the soldiers and flirted for a moment with his own more objective point of view, now he actually pulls the reader in by telling him only with difficulty, okay, or not very easily, haud facile, not easily, okay, would you be able to tell utrum an, whether, okay, whether Hannibal, and again, we're not going to get the subject repeated, whether Hannibal was dearer, and see carior again is a comparative, was more dear from, and again for our Latin 1 students, caris if you look in your grammar about the comparatives, in the comparative form, it becomes carior, carius. No, carior, carius. Okay, carior being the serving as the a masculine and feminine, and carior, being carius being just the neuter. So sorry. Okay. Okay. So if you haven't come across these comparatives yet, comparative and superlative forms. I mean, Wheelock delays them quite long. Most books don't get to them. Ecce Rhymi doesn't get to them until book 2. But like I say, it's like that person who had studied elementary French and wondered why they didn't speak intermediate French when he landed in Paris. Once you get into a real author, they're not going to be giving you Latin, Ecce Romani 2 Latin. It's not going to, that's just not, that's just not what you're going to see. So you have to have all on board. So, looking at real Latin does require you to kind of leap ahead. So if you look at your comparatives, you'll see that this is more dear, okay? So this is dear. And this is dearer, or more dear. Okay. So, you can almost hear the of English in the carrior, okay? Okay. But, so, itaque haud facile discerneres utrum imperatori an exercitu carrior esset, okay? So, whether he was more dear, and of course these are datives, to his commander or to the army itself. Okay. Let me just look to see if I want to. Okay, I'm actually going to stop here because I promised that we would going to go an hour and a half. Originally, I thought we'd be able to cover this in an hour, but I'll leave you with, like I say, wait, oh, hold on. I don't know if I can. No, I'm not going to stop at a semicolon. I'm going to go to this next little bit, okay? Because, like I say, he's going about where every statement actually leads into both gives information and raises a new question, okay? So here again, here at the end of this sentence, you're asking the question, well, and how? Why? Why? Why was this difficult to see? Right? If you're engaging deeply with this text, and this is the beauty of reading works in Latin, because even when you are doing the elaborate crossword puzzle, it forces you to stop and read very, very closely and to milk every single word, okay? Okay, because what you would read in a few seconds in English is taking you hours to read in Latin or Greek, okay? The famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche defined philology, which of course is the old time word for a person who studied Greek and Latin. He described philology as the art of teaching slow reading. Okay, langsam lesen, I think was his expression. It's the art of teaching slow reading. Okay, so the beauty of reading Latin, reading original text in Latin, is something you really just have to surrender to. It's almost just like, kind of a slow sort of, very slow process that you have to surrender to the beauty that comes from the lack of haste, the lack of ability to make haste, at least at the beginning. So, whether he was dearer to the emperor or to the army, and again, the reader's asking, well, why is it hard to tell which one he was dearer to? And so now Livy answers the question. He says, neque, neque, and you see he can use neither to set off two clauses where Hasdrubal, the commander, is going to be the subject of the first one, and Milites is going to be in the second. So he's going to show you, this neque would be equivalent in Greek to a men in the de. On the one hand, you couldn't tell because on the one hand, Hasdrubal, blah, 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 and on the other hand, the soldiers, blah, 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 blah. So let's see what this blah, 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 blah is, and then we'll conclude for today. But we will go back and read this the whole little bit that we've done so far again before we do the part. So neque Hasdrubal alium quemquam praeficere male ubi quid fortiter axtrenue agendum esset neque milites alio duce plus confidere aut audere. Okay, And I want you guys to note that we do have this continuous of these historical infinitives. Okay, you know, I mean, let's just for argument's sake assume that even credere is a historical infinitive. But we have, you know, credere, intuere. Okay, then effecity breaks out of it. But now we're back to here, mala and confidere and aldera. Okay, so neither did Hasdrubal mala. Did he prefer? Okay, and mala like nola and wola take the infinitive. So nor did he prefer to place in command, okay, alium quemquam, any other person, alium quemquam, and quemquam is one of these dreaded Q words, as I call them. They're a real mess, and they take quite a bit of effort to master in Latin. But alium, any other, okay, uh-oh, another thing is messing up here. Okay, alium quemquam praeficere mala, nor did he prefer to place anyone else in command, ubi quid fortiter extrinue agendum esset. When anything, quid, when anything, or where or when anything agendum esset had to be done, you know, with bravery and energy. Okay, if it was a tough job, he wanted no one else. The commander Hasdrubal preferred to have no one else in command. Neque Hasdrubal alium quemquam praeficere mala ubi quid fortiter extrinue agendum esset. And again, you know, it's very important when you read to be aware of these neques, because that neque, the minute you see that neque, you know there's going to be another one coming. Neque milites, nor did the soldiers what? And what about the soldiers? Confidere aldera. Nor did they have confidence, or were they daring? Okay, and then we have this adverbial plus. Were they more confident or more daring? Okay, alio duce. And again, you know, you could call this an ablative absolute, but I prefer my ablative of circumstances. But this is probably an ablative absolute, better term. You know, with any other commander, nor were the soldiers under any other commander more confident or daring. Okay, so that answers our question. Why haud facules disceneres utrum imperatori an exercitui carior esset? Why is that? Because neque Hasdrubal alium quemquam praeficere mala ubi quid fortiter extrinue agendum esset, neque milites alio duce plus confidere aldera. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the top and read this whole little bit that we've done so far, and then I'm going to shut us down because 2 hours is a good long time, and I don't want to, you know, I'm getting tired, and I'm sure you are too. Okay, so let's just read this. Let's read the whole little bit of this first, and we'll continue with this. I'll announce it on soon. Okay, misas Hannibal in Hispaniam primo statum aventu, omnum exercitum in se congretit. Hamicarum juvenem reditum sibi veteres milites credera, eundem rigorum in vultu, vemquem oculis, habitoris lineamentaque intueri. Dane brevi effecit ut pater in se minimum momentum ad favorem conciliandum esset. Num quam ingenium idem ad resti versissimas parendum atque imperandum habilius fuit. Ita quod facile disceneres utrum imperatori an exercitui carior esset. Neque Hasdrubal alium quemquam praeficere mala ubi quid fortiter extrinue agendum esset, neque milites alio duce plus Fidere audere. Okay, so okay, I'm going to shut this down here and say goodbye to you, but so I'll stop sharing and you can see me again. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that little taste. I mean, yeah, it was really slow, but I mean, like I say, I'm presenting this from the point of view of Latin 1 students, hopefully, so they can get a little taste of a very difficult author. I mean, Livy's no joke. But anyway, so that's our presentation. We resume part 2 of it, and we'll finish the exercise. But I want to encourage you all to contribute to our spring fundraising effort. We want to keep these free. We want to be able to put them up and not even think about it. We don't want to have to put a monetary gate on them because we'd like everyone to just be able to enjoy them. And I'll end by just announcing that I'll be headed out to Glacier National Park to officiate over DGL's Detroit Greek and Latin's Greek and Glacier summer program. The window for enrollment in the first part of the program, the Homeric course, has closed, but the second part of the program opens. The second part of the program, let me just bring that up for us. The second part of the program that begins in early July, and we'll focus on Herodotus, is still open to enrollment. So if anyone would like to join us for that, they could. So let's get right back to this. Give me a second. Okay, give you the exact information. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to share this document so we know. So I'm giving you the exact information. Okay, so Greek and Glacier is our summer program of intensive study in Glacier National Park, and Glacier National Park is up in the well, I'll show you where it is. Glacier National Park is right there, way up there. You'll be in the middle of nowhere, off the grid, among grizzly bears and outhouses, and far, far away. So you can really focus and study Greek, and we'll be reading Greek about 3 hours a day. Like I say, enrollment for the first course is closed, but the second course, which is scheduled to begin July 13th to August 31st, that is still open. So think about that if you have 2 weeks in the summer that you're free and you have a little background in Greek and would like to brush it up. We really did we're going to be doing the elementary straight in the first portion, which begins June 16th. Like I say, the period is kind of closed, but if someone wants to enroll, we could probably fit you in. But nevertheless, there'll be Herodotus and then Plato's Crito, a very short course in Plato's Crito in August, running for 9 days in August. Okay, and we'll be reading the Crito in Greek. So if you've been away from your Greek and would like to dust it off and get up and running again, bring your Smythe Greek grammar and I'm coming out and hang with me. We also have a little possibility of a Horace group, but no one's signed up for that yet. I mean, anyone who comes out, I can read with them Latin of their choice, but basically we're really focused on the Greek just because that's what I really enjoy most. So as far as the enrollment is concerned, the accommodations, our primary dorm, so to speak, is the North Fork Hostel. I'm going to assist you with arrangements. It's getting a little tight now that the summer season is upon us, but if you're a young person who's willing to camp with your tent, you'd be on this lawn that you see in front of the hostel, and you'd have access to this kitchen inside of there. And it's a pretty cool situation. I think Oliver charges about maybe $16 or $14 a day for to have a campsite. This is what the dorms look like inside the hostel. There's also more fancy arrangements that can be made, but it's a little late for that. I mean, those types of arrangements really have to be made back in January because, Glacier is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and things book up pretty quick. But like I say, if you were coming with a tent to the hostel, there's always room, and if push comes to shove, I'll let you camp on my lawn. Okay. But as far as getting there is concerned, you can fly into the Kalispell Airport, or you can take Amtrak into the West Glacier Station. If you're coming and you have notice, I'll be very happy to drive down and pick you up at the station for the courses. And there's other information about what to bring. There's a wonderful bakery there, and you can find this information on your site. But you can find this on our website. But if you'd like to have a few weeks of brushing off your Greek, do come out and join me in Glacier. It's going to be a great summer. No better place to spend the summer than Polebridge if you're the nature-loving type of person. Okay, so I thank you for checking in on this, and I beg you to subscribe, to contribute, and to support the delivery of high-level classics instruction by Detroit Greek and Latin. You'll see our wonderful little emblem back there. Okay, so I'll sign off now and wish you all the best. Voila.